Welcome back to Newsline here on KTN News. Tonight, interviews to pick arguably Kenya's most important jurist, the country's next Chief Justice, head of the judiciary and president of the highest court in the land, are set to enter the third day tomorrow. On Court of Appeal, Judge Martha Koome faces the Judicial Service Commission. 2 down as of tonight, 8 to go, as Kenyans wait to see what kind of CJ they will get. How independent will the next Chief Justice be, especially going into an election? How politically savvy will that man or woman be? How are interests from the executive going to play out in this process? What about interests of Kenyans? Welcome to the conversation. I'm joined in studio tonight by Homa Bay Senator Moses Kajwang, joining us via Zoom. We also have with us nominated Member of Parliament Jennifer Shamala, as well as lawyer Ishmael Nyaribo. Lady and gentlemen, many thanks for joining me tonight. If I can begin with you, Mheshimiwa Shamala, these interviews by the JSC are starting to gain traction among Kenyans. Kenyans are interested. We are hearing about political interest, talk of what State House wants, what the political establishment wants, and also we understand it is supposed also the CJ is supposed to represent the interests of Kenyans. What kind of CJ, the 15th CJ we're looking for now, are Kenyans looking for?
Thank you, Ben, for having me once again on KTN. Good evening to my fellow panelists. I found your intro interesting. Before I answer your question, you talked about interests within the executive, as if there aren't any other interests. Now, they definitely are other interests, and I'm sure that as the show goes along, I will expound on those interests. Having said that, the pertinent part I got of your question is, what kind of a Chief Justice are Kenyans looking for? What is very, very important and what we need to understand as a people is that the three arms of government, you have the executive, you have parliament, of course, and then you have the judiciary. The judiciary does not exist outside of a country called Kenya. It does not exist on another planet. And with the utmost respect to the former Chief Justice, David Maraga, who will be remembered for his access to justice and building courts around Kenya, I think that one of the things that has not been tackled is the issue of corruption within one of the arms of government. In as much as we go on and on and on about the corruption within the executive, we don't address the issue within the judiciary. And as an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, I totally and I believe, and I have said it, that this is the temple of justice. Yet it is the former Chief Justice, Willie Mutunga, who stated in 2016 at a public forum that, can you imagine a judge bribing another judge? And he was addressing an issue with regards to the election of the representatives on the JSC of magistrates and of judges. This issue of corruption has not been highlighted within the courts, which is the temple of justice, which is actually the beginning and the end of how everything works within this country.
All right.
If I am, so I can, let me give it a pause, let the fellow panelists have their piece, and I will continue on this particular topic.
Well said, Mesh. And the reason why I singled out the executive is because the three arms of government are supposed to be independent of each other, and we have seen a proposal in the BBI report for the Judiciary Ombudsman to be appointed by the President. Senator Kajwang, when there is talk of interests from other arms of government, is that something that Kenyans should be concerned about in this process of picking out the next CJ?
Thank you, Ben, and a good evening to my co-panelists and the viewers at large. The three arms of government are independent, but they are also interdependent, such that the judiciary, in as much as it would stand on its own, still relies on Parliament and the executive for budgetary support and also for oversight. And Parliament, the legislature, is still also subject to the judiciary. Just yesterday, there was a court ruling touching on the division of revenue, which is a function of Parliament. So, the judiciary can intervene where Parliament is going off track, and Parliament and the executive also have a way of balancing the power between it and the judiciary. However, in this process that is currently ongoing, Kenyans would expect that the JSC that is acting in accordance with the Constitution and the relevant statutes would exercise some fair level of independence in its thinking, in its selection criteria, and produce the best man or woman for the job of Chief Justice. Just to pick up from where Mheshimiwa Shamala has left it, I also do agree that corruption is one issue that the new Chief Justice must deal with and must take head on. There is no reason why some cases, particularly cases of corruption featuring the high and mighty, should be dragging in the corridors of justice forever. That is an injustice. But on top of corruption, I would like to see a Chief Justice who will bring Kenya back to the rule of law rather than the rule by law. There is so much impunity in this country. You find institutions like Parliament and the executive getting away with things that are clearly in violation of the Constitution, and the judiciary does not call them to order, even when ordinary members of the public petition the judiciary to render a verdict. So on top of corruption, let us restore the rule of law rather than the rule by law. But then there will be a very unique challenge for the third Chief Justice of the Republic of Kenya. Whereas Mutunga found himself in a situation where he midwifed a new constitution and new institutions and provided an identity for the judiciary in a new constitutional dispensation, the Chief Justice Maraga found himself right in the middle of the election issues. The third Chief Justice, unfortunately, will still find that the mess that Maraga talked about as far as electoral justice or electoral injustice is concerned has never been fully resolved, has not been addressed. And the third Chief Justice will also find themselves in the midst of the Building Bridges initiative. And there are so many petitions that are pending in the courts of law. And so this Chief Justice must be a very judicious character who is not carried away by the whims and the desires of the political class, but one who is able to stand up for the things that are right and the things that are constitutional. In fact, it might not necessarily be a pure Maraga. It does not necessarily have to be a pure Mutunga. Maybe we need an angel who's an inbreed between the two. One who stands strongly for the rule of law, and one also who stands strongly for building institutions and fighting corruption. All right.
Let me come to you, Bwana Wakili Ishmael Nyaribo. Willie Mutunga was seen as a man of the people, kind of a CJ. Popular with Kenyans, CJ Maraga was a man of the judicial system, so to speak. We are, again, going into an election in the next less than 18 months. What kind of a CJ, in your opinion, do we need?
I think thanks Ben and thanks to my co-panelists, what my friends have pointed out is very important. One, of course there will be no angel, as Honorable Kajwang is hoping. There will be no angel. There will be people picked from villages and wherever they grew up, and they are going to be one of them is going to be appointed as a CJ. It will be an ordinary citizen. What is there, and I think the kind of CJ the country needs now, is a person, one who is practical, completely practical. If you look at Mutunga, he made the court so friendly. Judges would come to court and say, sorry, I was held up doing something. And the judiciary came quite close to the citizens. When you look at the Honorable Maraga, when he came in, he was a stickler to law. He was completely fixated on doing what the rule of law is. But still, Kenyans are not satisfied that these two actually delivered to the Kenyans what they dream about. So the next Chief Justice, in my view, and we must be so thankful to the Constitution of Kenya that public participation has brought to fore what Kenyans want. They are now able to critique, they are able to send memorandums of all manner to the Judicial Service Commission to give them opportunity to understand what kind of Chief Justice the Kenyans want. most important, apart from the corruption element, is the fact that somebody can make results be felt. This stalemate, where you find the judges have been appointed and they cannot be sworn in, and there is no solution to it, should find an end to it. We should have a closure to this. If you look at the kind of questions the JSC is interested in asking the panel, the interviewees,
right,
you will see they are asking exactly, what will you do to resolve gender problem? What will you do to resolve the stalemate on the judges being sworn in? So the public wants to hear direct explanation. In fact, we were so we were so happy when we saw Chitembwe saying negotiation is the basis. I was also listening to Honorable Mbote today saying it is important to get down to sit with people and have a conclusion, have a negotiated kind of solution. Therefore, it's a CJ who is not so much a stickler to the law, who is not so much popular with the people, but somebody who is practical. He can sit down every other department, both the executive, parliament, and the judiciary. Thank you.
All right. Mheshimiwa Shamala, listening to the first two interviewees appear before the JSC, that is Justice Said Chitembwe and today Professor Mbote, what do you think the interview panel is looking for?
Thank you, Ben, for that question. I first want to state that I am an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, and I intend to practice for many years. Even I practice now and even thereafter. So it's important for me I don't want to delve into the interview process as per the candidates.
Right.
What I did notice and what struck me, and it's too early in the day to talk about how the process is going because there's only two candidates who have been interviewed. And I did talk about interests, and those interests don't just come from the executive. Those interests are being played out very clearly on social media, and you can see that certain people are actually betting on particular candidates. But what I noticed and what I take offense with is some of the line of questioning by the commissioners. What we must understand is that these people have applied for a job, that the right to dignity is the platform of all rights, that the questioning is not a trial, it is not cross-examination, and is not trying to put people on the spot. That's not what it's about. It's really asking the person, but when you hear somebody or a commissioner say, you did this, it's very impolite. I think it's disrespectful. So one of them, and I'm not saying that all the commissioners have used that tone in interviewing, but when you do that, because you not only look at the line of questioning, you watch the body language, and being an officer of the court, I'm very well aware of the interests as to who becomes the next Chief Justice of this country, and from all quarters. And to say to ourselves that, it's the executive and it's a politicization, the entire structure of government, of the state, from the arm, the judiciary, to the parliament, to the other arm of government, which is executive, is political. So we cannot divorce the political interests and assume that the judiciary, yes, it is the temple of justice, but it is run by people. It is one arm of government in which sovereign power has been granted by the people of Kenya. So it still remains our political process. It would be naive for us to think that it's a fairy tale sort of process.
All right, Senator Kajwang, onto what Mheshimiwa Shamala is saying, we have seen the Judicial Service Commission embroiled in some interesting fights within the members, the commissioners who are always supposed to chair the sessions, and all those seem to be in the back burner for now. But to many people, it appears that they suggest this interest that Mheshimiwa Shamala is talking about. Even talking to Kenyans and seeing comments on social media, people seem to be waiting for certain candidates and to see how they will be grilled. Some people are talking of some candidates as being State House candidates. I don't know, allied to which political wings. What are your thoughts on this, on such interests in such an exercise?
I think one of the things that our constitutional drafters did, which was genius compared to other jurisdictions like the United States, was not to subject the nomination and vetting of a Supreme Court judge to Parliament. You do recall at this sunset of Donald Trump's administration, he pushed through a fairly young advocate to join the Supreme Court, and even though she was qualified and she was confirmed to the role, it was very acrimonious, with the Democrats pointing fingers at the Republicans over the manner in which this particular judge was appointed. I think she was called Amy Collett. Thank God that it is not Parliament doing these interviews, because I think that it probably would have been a much bigger disaster if we look at the manner in which we've been vetting candidates for other positions like cabinet secretaries and those other positions. The issues going on within the JSC, in my view, are just part of organizational dynamics. The commission is composed of ambitious men and women, people who are at the pinnacle of their legal career, and it is expected that there will be differences in opinion. What I do hope and what I do pray for is that there will be some unanimity in the candidate that will be presented to the president for confirmation. It would be a disaster if we hear a member of the selection panel coming up and saying that that was not the decision that we arrived at when we were at the meeting. We have had such things happening. You do recall when we are releasing the BBI report, there are some members of the task force who went out and said that they did not support the final report that came out. I do believe that JSC and the selection panel and the legal fraternity and profession in this country, there is so much to protect as far as that profession is concerned, that I do not expect that there's going to be circus. I do not expect that there's going to be some obvious favors that will be dispensed. But even though Parliament is not involved in this matter completely, it is still a political process. We have seen in the past certain appointments that did not have to take partisan angles. For example, I have no doubts about the capability of the current Auditor General, but there was a feeling that the process of selecting an Auditor General was based on other factors like ethnic and regional balance rather than competence. There are people who believe, even though the statute says and the Constitution talks about ethnic, regional, and gender balance, but sometimes in very precise professions, like even law, even medicine, or other very precise professions, sometimes it is important to first look at merit and then look at regional, ethnic considerations as secondary. Indeed, Ben, it is not strange for a country to even have a foreign chief justice. I do believe that in Kenya, the legal profession has matured to such an extent that we have got enough experts. But if it came to it, there is nothing that stops us from getting a chief justice who is not necessarily as black as we are. So I don't want to dwell too much on the intrigues within the JSC, but I want to believe that their motivation is far much greater, and what they hold as far as the esteem and dignity of the legal profession and the administration of justice is concerned in this country, they cannot afford the kind of theatrics that sometimes we see in Parliament when we are vetting people for important positions.
All right. Be that as it may, well said, Bwana Senator, do you think there is a possibility of pressure from some quarters to pick a CJ who will be who would easily dance to the tunes of the executive, especially going into murky waters of succession politics?
I think that's why I said earlier on that beyond corruption, beyond the independence of the institution, that we need a CJ who asserts that we must run Kenya by the rule of law, not just in the impunity that we have seen. And those who are easily persuaded by the powers that be, they are going to become lords of impunity. And it will be unfortunate if those persuasions are going to carry the day. But what I know is that, yes, there are political players with an interest in 2022, and we have seen what Chief Justice Maraga did. It was not pleasing to many players in the political field, And I know that there are those who will be keen on making sure that we do not have a repeat of such independence, of such, strong-headedness, that you can make a decision no matter how unpopular it is. Definitely, there will be undercurrents. But as I said, I'm glad it is out of Parliament's purview. And I'm glad that it has been left to the wise men and women within the JSC, because that to me, I have some fairly good confidence in them that they will make a proper decision. I just want to urge them to resist the political overtures that will be coming from players and do the right thing for Kenya, because right now the only institution that seems to be functioning with some conscience and with some sort of concern for Kenyans is the judiciary.
Before I go to Bwana Wakili, Mheshimiwa Shamala, what's your take on the role of Parliament in this?
I'm almost certain, in accordance with Article 166 of the Constitution of Kenya, that the name of the nominee for Chief Justice, so Parliament has a huge role to play, will be forwarded to Parliament, to the National Assembly. In fact, his or her name will come before the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, and Parliament may approve or refuse to approve. And it doesn't vet, but that candidate will appear before that committee. A report will be prepared, a report will be tabled and debated upon. And if not approved, it goes right back, because if approved, the name then goes to the president for assent. Yes.
Bwana Wakili, give me your thoughts on these interests that we are talking about that may be coming to play either above the surface or even behind the scenes.
Ben, these interests are not new, let's be honest. These interests have been there from even before we had the 2010 Constitution. Interests have been there because in political and governance situations, everybody wants to have his role. And talking all the way from State House to the villagers, the public has shown huge excitement right now because they have been given this opportunity for public participation. And as I said, you will see they are writing all manner of allegations, accusations, whether it's in private life, whether it's your high school life, university, talk of your work life. The public is involved. They have an interest. And as I talk here, we all are on social media. You will see people are actually already, grading the candidates their own marks, and it's all over there on the social media. So even at the end of this exercise, if uniquely a name that actually has not really convinced the public for some reason or the other, and of course, I'm not trying to say that the public is part of the JSC. The JSC have certain, questions and set of units that they are looking at when they are interviewing, but the public can see. That's why it's all on live media. We can see how everybody is answering. Therefore, Ben, these interests are not new. We need not fear about them. There is no way State House cannot have an interest. There is no way Parliament will not have an interest. There is no way judges themselves will not be having a huge interest in who is succeeding and who is becoming the CJ. Therefore, to me, honestly, it's not a new thing. The only hope we have is that the JSC will remain independent at the end of the day. If you say 2 or 3 commissioners could be, leaning towards, group A or B, that is 1 or 2. They will give their marks. The rest of the commissioners will also give their marks. The rest of the fights after the marks have been awarded to each candidate, you can never control that. You cannot really say it is immoral or it's illegal or it's unconstitutional. Like my colleagues have said clearly, it's a political process. Therefore, Kenyans should not be so worried about the interests. Kenyans' eyes should be fixated on the commissioners and the questions they're asking and what will be the end results. I think the interest is not a big issue here.
All right. Before we let this go, Mheshimiwa Shamala, one final thing. We did see a lot of fights between the Chief Justice Emeritus, David Kenani Maraga, and the executive arm of government, President Uhuru Kenyatta. we did see fights about the budgetary cuts to the judiciary, fights about President's refusal, according to the former CJ, to appoint some 41 judges of the Court of Appeal. We did see some threats about revisiting after the election petition of 2017. And Maraga was accused of not being politically savvy. Is there a need for the next CJ? Because they say even a nation learns as it grows. Being another CJ in the new constitutional dispensation, is there a need for the next CJ to be politically savvy, so to speak?
Yeah. In a lot of jurisdictions, the study of law or law degree is preceded by a bachelor's degree. It's a postgraduate degree, and it's something I would advocate for in this country. Yes, I think it's extremely important to be politically savvy and to understand at the basic minimum, at least political science. Lawyers mainly do. Having said that, I think when the history books will be written, and if I write part of it, I will have a lot to say, is on the annulment. I think the two big issues was the annulment. Budgetary cuts happen across the board and across various agencies and arms of government. But the two big things about Maraga's legacy will be the annulment of the 2017 election. And yes, it was a very big thing in a very interesting way when we look at it in hindsight. We were the fourth country to have annulled an election after Austria, there was Maldives, and Ukraine. And for me, the country that is interesting is Ukraine. Their election was annulled in 2014. It followed the trajectory that Kenya was almost going into. The president is run out of town by a color revolution funded by George Soros. And if you recall, after I beg your pardon, the former Chief Justice upholds the presidential election after we go to the ballot the second time, that's when the National Resistance Army was formed, a National Resistance Army in Kenya. And I do remember clearly one Miguna stating that there will be no election, insisting, adamant, that we were not going to go into the second election. So there are a lot of parallels to be drawn between Ukraine and Kenya. And it is my personal and considered opinion, and I could be very wrong, that the former Chief Justice, David Maraga, may have unwittingly been a pawn in a bigger, larger political game. It's just a hypothesis. I'm not saying that these are facts. Having said that, I am on record with regards to the president refusing to have the 41 judges be promoted to the Court of Appeal. And it's not a secret out there. Adverse information was given to the President of the Republic of Kenya by the security agencies on some of those people on that list. Now, it has been argued, why doesn't he, or why is that information not relayed to the Judicial Service Commission? It was the duty of the Judicial Service Commission to have pointed this out. Having said that, again, as an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, I will tell you something. Ask the people of Kenya, do a survey, and ask them how many complaints have they put in writing to the Judicial Service Commission, and is that out there in the public? Because the memoranda with regards to the candidates that are being interviewed for the Chief Justice is out there for the public. But we do not have a portal, the people of Kenya, where they can see the complaints made against judicial officers.
All right.
And so the issue is, and it's constant blame on the executive, but the National Security Agency doesn't work just for the executive, it works for this country. And it would have been the duty of JSC to have checked the backgrounds. And some of these things, as officers of the court, we are aware of ourselves. There are no secrets in Kenya.
All right.
What is alleged or what has been reported about some of these candidates.
Senator Kajwang, as we wind up on the CJ, you were on the other side of that annulment of the presidential election results and subsequent election petition. What are your thoughts on that?
Justice Maraga insisted on fidelity to the law. And I think that that's a very strong spine and a very strong quality of a Chief Justice. And a very good strain of jurisprudence, fidelity to the law. I wanted just to, on the back of what we had discussed earlier, when I talk about the role of Parliament in this process, of course, it is Parliament to process the final nominee, and that is just one. It is not Parliament to go through the 10 interviewees, and I think that's where I find some relief that Parliament's role will be just to validate or to invalidate what the JSC has done, and the President's role also will be to just deal with the one nominee that's coming from the JSC. There is something you mentioned earlier, Ben, that perhaps before we close this conversation, we could deal with. The issue of the role of the public in this exercise. Social media has brought into effect the aspect of public participation in ways that are positive and in ways that are not so positive. Like in this process, I have friends who are probably qualified to have applied for that position. But when they look at the scrutiny, when they look at the manner in which candidates are being discussed in social media, the manner in which they are seemingly being undressed in the full glare of cameras, there are many people who hesitate to apply for public service positions like these ones. Because of the scrutiny, because of the exposure, they will have to bring in their families, and there'll be some other questions that are there to test how strong you are, to test your mettle. And so it will be very difficult to deal with that now, particularly the conversations going around social media, because you have enough laws, and those laws are not doing anything to provide comfort to candidates in public positions, that if they were to face a panel, no one is someone is not going to come up with scandalous things about them. But Ben, I have no problem with people having a robust conversation about the candidates who are potentially the presidents of the judiciary, because even those who lead the other arms of government, the presidency, in the executive, and the people who sit in the legislature, they are subjected to even more scathing scrutiny by members of the public. So this should be taken in stride, but unfortunately, it is putting off many professionals from putting in the applications for these positions.
Senator Kajwang, in 30 seconds only, the annulment of the presidential election in 2017, in your opinion, is it a strong point of the Maraga legacy or a blemish?
I think it is one of the strongest points of Maraga's legacy. It is one people who are not deeply immersed in the legal system and the judicial system in this country. We remember Maraga for his annulment of the presidential results. We remember Maraga for his fights with the executive. We remember Maraga for extending the reach of the judiciary by building courts all over the country, including in Homa Bay, where I joined him to launch an infrastructure project. But the top of mind legacy is that annulment. And I think that that has had a contagion effect, not just regionally, but globally. And it has emboldened judicial officers to stand up against the excesses of the executive and to stand up against election gerrymandering.
I must interject. I think that, yes, indeed, the annulment of the presidential election of 2017 will be probably the strongest mark on the former Chief Justice Maraga. It is why we have reached and arrived at BBI, because he annulled the election and everything was okay. But when he upheld the election, it was said that they would not recognize that decision. And that was when the National Resistance Army began, and we shall never forget the cost to this country, I've said it time and time again, went into trillions of shillings, that continued violence, or the continued cycle of violence. So Maraga's legacy is what it led to today, the understanding that we need that this system of government and this systems of governance are just not working. We have to have this handshake, and we have to have the conversation we have today.
Right.
That, in my view, is Chief Justice David Maraga's legacy.
All right. Wakili Nyaribo, as we populate what the next CJ...
Ben,
yes.
Yeah, I just want to say this.
Tell me this, Bonakili.
Do we show interdependence?
Tell me this, Bonakili, as you respond to that. What are some of the... Are there any lessons that we can learn as a country from the clashes and the many fights that we saw between the executive and the judiciary during the Maraga era?
Yeah, yeah. That's exactly what I wanted to say. Maraga was very independent, by the way. No one questions that. And he was a stickler to the law. And every citizen believes in his decisions, starting from the annulment and all throughout his tenure. But how do we demonstrate interdependence between the three arms of government if the security, the executive and security say there is certain information that they have about certain judges, but they are not able to share that with the JSC or the Chief Justice of Kenya, and share that with probably the executive. So I tend to think that when we talk about how all arms should work together, there must be a way the national intelligence facilities are able to interact with the Chief Justice and the Judicial Service Commission well in time, and also if the department receives information even after the interview, so that the department in charge or the multi-agencies will not keep information until names are being forwarded to the head of state for appointment. Just the same thing like now, we are having all these interviews. Maybe the security, departments have certain information about one or two of them, and maybe that is the candidate who is going to be recommended to the president. So if we say that we want the three arms of government to work together, it is important to cook correct information, collect correct information, and take them to the correct department and share with the three arms of government, at least in such a manner that a name is not forwarded all the way and then it's rejected at the end of it all. Yeah.
All right. Let's leave it there. We will continue to cover these interviews by the Judicial Service Commission. You can stay with KTN News for the live interviews and, of course, qualified analysis of this as it happens. Two candidates have been interviewed so far, Justice Said Chitembwe and Professor Kameri Mbote. Tomorrow is the turn of Court of Appeal Judge Martha Koome. This process continues until the 30th of April, after which the JSC will also hold interviews for the position of Judge of the Supreme Court. I want us to switch over to something, to a couple of things quickly. I want to hear your reactions to those. First of all, let me begin with you, Senator Kajwang, and that is what has been happening in terms of political alliances. We have been having talk of updates on these political alliances every now and then. The latest one, since the last time we spoke at least, concerns the ODM party, that is your party, over this possibility of an alliance between Raila Odinga and William Ruto, a meeting between the ODM deputy party leader and who is also the Kakamega Governor, Wycliffe Oparanya, with Ruto, after which a day later he also met with Raila Odinga in Karen to brief him of what happened. Is there anything being talked about, or are we overplaying our sources with this?
The elders say that a frog does not jump in broad daylight for nothing. It is either chasing something or something is chasing it. And so when you see all these meetings going on, definitely something is cooking. The only thing that from where I sit and as a senator and as a member of the ODM party, I think there was a lot of speculation about the demise and the death of the handshake, and that now that there was going to be a divorce, we are going to move over to the other jilted lover within the Jubilee coalition. I think nothing could be further from the truth. The handshake is strong. The values that allowed Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta, who at some point people thought had irreconcilable differences, those values, that conviction, that vision, that aspiration for a united and cohesive Kenya, it's still alive. The flame is still alive. What I've said in the past is that there have been busybodies on both sides of the divide. There have been busybodies on the Raila side, and there have been busybodies on the Uhuru side. People who perhaps are not used to this politics of calmness and politics of building bridges, because they have built their political careers on burning bridges. And they're not just on our side, they are also on the president's side. And some of these people have been very loud, proclaiming that they're being shortchanged, proclaiming that they have other ideas about 2022. I want to assure you, Ben, and I want to assure Kenyans watching, that those values and the conviction that allowed Raila and Uhuru, who were furious enemies. We've just discussed the annulment of the presidential elections and how heated it was. Shamal has talked of NRA or National Resistance Movement that was there. Those values, that conviction is still alive. There could be delays with the BBI process. And I do recall the last time I appeared on this show, I said that COVID was going to introduce delays that were unforeseen. And that was before the third wave was proclaimed. And that was before this lockdown was done. For example, the Senate today met, and we have now gone on recess until the 11th of May. If we were to start considering the BBI report on the 11th of May, it would definitely have an implication on the timelines that had earlier been set. But some of these things, like the pandemic, are almost like acts of God. They're things that you couldn't have foreseen.
We'll get into the BBI
on track, and the conviction and the vision of the two principles is intact.
Tell me this very quickly. We'll get into the BBI and the supposed cracks that could have been there or that people are speculating about, but is a relationship or a working political alliance between Raila Odinga and William Ruto viable in your perspective?
As they say, there are no permanent enemies in politics, but I think that there have been certain ideological distinctions between the two that then makes it quite difficult to craft together an ideology or to craft together a manifesto that can move the country forward. However, the BBI process envisages a situation where all players in the political field will have a role to play, either in government or in a responsible opposition. I don't think that we are averse to having a conversation that can bring down the tempers, that can cool down the political temperatures, so that when we get into the next election, we are getting into the next election knowing that you are either in government or you will be part of an opposition that will be keeping the government in check. That was something that was missing from the current constitution because it had a winner takes it all mentality. I do not think that the difference between Raila Odinga and William Ruto is personal. It is not hatred. It is not coming from the heart. The differences are ideological. And the differences are just about how do we restart our economy, how do we bring our country to prosperity. Raila Odinga coming from a social democratic perspective and William Ruto coming from an unknown political ideology. I think those are the differences. They are not personal. And if at some point William Ruto says that he believes that BBI will cure and heal the wounds of this country and is part of that process and he wants to support it and he wants to be part of a government of national unity or a unitary government post-2022, I do not think that anybody who means well for this country would kick out somebody and tell him to sit outside simply because you've got ideological differences.
Ishmael Nyaribo, please wear your political punditry hat very quickly for us. Raila Odinga was described, or has been described for years as a leftist politician. He's now being labeled as somebody who came to the center and now to the right with a handshake. The deputy president's Hustler movement, what he purports to want to, to his politics to stand for, do you think the two of them can work together in a coalition?
Well, I'm learning from the politician, Honorable Kajwang, that the differences are not personal. I don't want to remember all those, abuses and insults which are all over on television and print media. I just want to imagine, like the MP says, the senator, sorry, I just want to imagine that, like he says, they really mean nothing. They are not coming from the heart. But having said that, can Raila Odinga work with William Ruto? The truth of the matter is, even if you see that Honorable Raila Odinga has come to the center, it is actually wisdom and calculation-based. It is not like most people imagine that it's opportunity. Raila shook hands with the head of state. After calculating, after thinking broadly, what can I do? Then he looked at the whole arithmetic and said, I will shake the hand because I want to save my own people. You remember his own supporters were actually all over the place, not accepting to be comforted in any manner. Therefore, Raila did that knowing exactly what is at stake. Now, when you look at William Ruto, to be very honest and fair to him, he's a vibrant and intelligent politician, the way he presents himself. But you see that aspect of calculation and wisdom missing. That is how you see him coming so strongly, then he falls over to the other side. I mean, Raila Odinga could have stuck with Miguna and probably fly over to Canada and stay over there, and we could not be having Raila Odinga. So he is a very wise politician. When it comes to saying, like now there's the pandemic, we are supposed to be proceeding to the referendum according to the earlier plans by May, June. You see, he knows this is not probably going to work. So I think he's coming to shake hands, and he's coming to decide, I want to come this way in terms of politics, is wisdom and calculation based. Therefore, he can easily work with William Ruto if William Ruto also grows up and comes to this level of wisdom so that they can save the country. There is absolutely nothing. But before I leave that, Ben, you must note that the person with the carrot today is singularly Uhuru Kenyatta, the president. Whichever way he moves, it will attract both the Raila Odinga and William Ruto to that place where he moves. All right.
Mheshimiwa Shamala, talk to us about this. There is One Kenya Alliance, then there is this political alliance that is being mooted between these two. Would such an alliance between Raila Odinga and William Ruto put Uhuru Kenyatta in all sorts of trouble in terms of leaving his legacy as he wants to?
No, first and foremost, absolutely not. I can't agree more than what I agree. I'm in total agreement with what the senator has said and what Council Ishmael has said. And let us never forget that the BBI was always about inclusiveness. So if we have a vast, a significant group of people, and a vast group of people who are not going to believe in the BBI, then it's counterproductive for the BBI, because it was about, never again inclusiveness. And as Council said, it's not, and the senator, it's not a winner take it all. A winner take it all was never going to work. You can be a powerful leader of the opposition. So when you see people talking who you couldn't have imagined 2 weeks ago, or even 2 months ago, or even 2 weeks ago, I think it's excellent. I think it's positive for Kenya, because now we're learning, we're understanding, we're appreciating that, let's put other things aside and now let's look forward. So it's a very positive indication for me. Having said that, we wait to hear from the leadership, because none of the leaders have made the statements. It's us who are speculating. But all in all, it's positive, and I think it's excellent for the nation of Kenya. All
right. Let's leave that alone. Let's talk about one final thing before we wind up the show, and that is the BBI. And there is some talk that the BBI is slowly dying. Now, this has been ongoing for quite some time. We've talked about it here on the show. It has been, those reports have been rubbished. Let me begin with you again, Mheshimiwa Shamala. You sit in the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee. All indications are that there will not be a constitutional referendum by June, as was earlier envisaged. Your committee, the Joint Committee, was tasked with this process. I understand you asked for more time. There seems to be, it doesn't seem to be clear what is really happening. Maybe you can, bring us to speed.
I'm smiling so much, Ben, because as I was waiting when I came in on the sports news, they were talking about whether the Olympics is going to go on or if it's not going to go on. And nobody used the words, it's stalling, it's the end of the Olympics, and that's it. And as the senator said, there is the issue of the pandemic. We were in Parliament, I said it on your show, on the 30th of March, and we requested to be able to table the report, and we were told by the Speaker that the debate would go on the 1st of April. Subsequently, we had to, maybe I've got the dates wrong, but subsequently we needed to adjourn Parliament. Why? The pandemic. So why is the pandemic and the issue of the report divorced? I don't understand. Having said that, I can categorically tell you, as a member of the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, and I told you as much the last time we met, that the report was almost complete. It was a matter of merging the thematic areas that had been brought out with the and putting them together, and that's complete. We have the experts' views, we have our internal reports from the committees, and it's a matter of putting them together. So to suggest
there are no political disagreements over some of the issues, like the 17 new constituencies between the two sides of the political divide.
How would they be political disagreements when this matter was subjected to the county assemblies? Why did those political disagreements or political issues not pan out there? Why would they now come out here? And I think that people are desperately looking under every mat, under every pillow for some sort of disagreement. As of last week, the press, the media were absolutely sure that this is coming to a standstill, that the report is not ready, that Parliament is calling for a special sitting. There were all kinds of... And I posed the question, and perhaps I do have the answers then for another day, another time. Who it was feeding this misinformation? As far as I know, we are on course. And the only thing, there are obviously lots of scenarios, a lot of other things can happen that I cannot foresee. Mm-hmm. But having said that, the Honourable Senator was categorical, and we talked about, for everything else it is understood. For the Olympics it is understood there might be a delay because of COVID. But when it comes to BBI, there has to be something far more ulterior than just the pandemic. Well
said. Senator Kajwang, all this speculation started from your side, the ODM side. When your counterpart, your minority leader in the Senate, James Orengo, and the MP for Arieda spoke, and those things were seen to be some kind of communication to the president's side that things are not okay. Are we seeing things below the surface coming to the fore, even though there are efforts to try and mend things?
You see, bills, when they come before the House and they come for second reading, it is usually ideal to have the committee dealing with the matter bring a report to the House. The report of the committee is usually persuasive. It helps members who might not have expertise in the matter to benefit from the expertise of a small committee, like the committee that Mheshimiwa Shamala sits on. And this time round, we decided to do a joint committee between the Justice and Legal Affairs committees of the Senate and of the National Assembly. But there have been situations where bills have proceeded through second reading, even before the committee has brought a report back to the House. Mm-hmm. I think what the speakers of Parliament are trying to do is a balance between allowing the committee to do a proper job that will form the nation, that will form part of our legislative procedures. Because an amendment by popular initiative, the Constitution has not been very prescriptive. And that's why people as eminent as Professor Kivutha Kibwana has gone to the courts of law to seek an interpretation on how the process ought to be. I think that even as the judiciary provides guidance on how the process ought to be, Parliament also has a responsibility to persuade members of Parliament, to persuade the nation that whatever we are doing is proper. At the end of the day, even if the Justice and Legal Affairs committees were to say, God forbid, scrap the 70 constituencies, scrap the Prime Minister, etc., etc., it is not binding on Parliament. Exactly. Members will still have to debate the draft bill alongside the report of the committee, and members will still have to take a position on the bill that was brought to Parliament. And members have a right to reject any amendments that are proposed on the floor of the House. So I do not think there is a crisis. And I do not think that those people who believe that Parliament has got a duty to scrutinize the draft bill and to scrutinize the constitutionality of some of those provisions, it is not an idle argument. Ultimately, the decision shall be taken at the plenary. And that decision will be taken by all delegations in the Senate and all elected and nominated members of Parliament in the National Assembly, rather than by the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee. Exactly. So I do not think that we have a crisis. Okay. I think that JLAC is doing what it ought to do, because it is not just a committee that rubber stamps, it is a committee that can make observations, exactly, that can help us when we are processing the next referendum, because this is the first proper referendum done through public initiative under this constitution. All right.
Ishmael, as your closing remarks, the timelines are being missed in this process now that it is in Parliament. There is the pandemic, the COVID-19 protocols that have slowed the process down, obviously. All indications are that we will not have a referendum. What are your thoughts on this?
By the way, all the negative energy, all the criticism, all the BBI will not be there, I think it's coming from the same quarters which started criticizing the handshake in 2018. Therefore, we should not really be so worried, but we should also be factual. When a person of the stature of Honorable James Orengo says that they are not comfortable, you cannot wish that away. I mean, there must be a reason why he is not happy, and he has been in politics and he understands quite a bit. So I tended to think that because of the pandemic, the country is under huge international pressure as well to comply with the health protocols, not only locally, but internationally. You can see that the UK, US have already given their citizens, red alerts about traveling to Kenya. So it's not a question of Raila and Uhuru and the Parliament just saying, that we are not going to have the BBI or Parliament saying we will not debate. It's a huge international pressure, and we have to consider the fact that this pandemic is there. But Ben, probably if it goes on, there is a possibility that the president might think of requesting Parliament to approve some form of overstay in the State House until the pandemic has gone down and we probably implement the BBI. I don't know. Kajwang and Shamala, they are in Parliament, they might know that, but there is no way we are not going into the referendum according to the agreement made by the two leaders.
All right, thank you, Ishmael. Let me give you 40 seconds only, Mheshimiwa Shamala, for your final remarks.
My final remark is that it is extremely important for us to appreciate and to understand that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and that we cannot read too much into certain actions that are taken. For example, when we say the deadline is in June, where is this deadline coming from? This was what was anticipated. And the repercussions are what if we don't have this deadline? The only deadline is really if it comes to the boundaries, which must be at least 12 months before an election. Having said that, I think that going forward, we must appreciate the situation we are in as a country in the pandemic, and we've done pretty well as of now, and not read too much into things, and do a lot more fact-finding and getting what is really on the ground than a lot of the issues that are flying around. And once again, Ben, thank you very, very much for having us on KTN.
Thank you, Mheshimiwa. Senator Kajwang, your final remarks. 40 seconds only, please.
Ben, I want to assure the nation and our viewers that our party leader, Raila Odinga, and the president, we are working on a broad-based coalition. We want to have broad-based consensus to ensure that as we go into the next election, it is not just a competition for power for its own sake. We want to go into the next election with a clear purpose that post-2022, the greatest challenge facing us will be economic recovery. Yeah. Secondly, building institutions and making sure the institutions work. And thirdly, making sure that we've got a governance framework that does not tolerate and condone corruption. Those are the three things, and if anybody is willing to be part of the conversation on the economy, on institutions and governance, we are ready to work with them to ensure that there's prosperity for Kenyans post-2022.
Thank you, Mr. Senator. Thank you, all of you, for joining me on Newsline tonight. Homa Bay Senator Moses Kajwang, nominated Member of Parliament Jennifer Shamala, and lawyer and political analyst Ishmael Nyaribo. Always a pleasure having you in studio. Many thanks for joining us on Newsline tonight. That's why we leave it on the broadcast. For all of us here on Newsline, we do appreciate The privilege of your time tonight. Thank you for watching. Our sign language interpreter tonight was Maresha Owiti. For all of us, I am Ben Kitili. Good night from Nairobi.